Finish my house. So I bought a house with my sister, so we've been like remodeling it like little by little. So that's our goal. Like we want to be done with the inside this year so that next year we could focus on the outside stuff. Tacos al pastor, but with no piña. Oh, my favorite saint? Saint Cecilia, patron of musicians. I was in choir for like 10 plus years. I mean, I would sing and then I would do like the pandero, like the claves, the thing that goes. Mi nombre es Amy Gonzalez, tengo 25 años y fui criada en Chicago, pero mis papás son de Michoacán. Y ahorita lo que hago en mi tiempo es contrato maestras para secundaria. My life before my conversion, I would say, was very interesting because I grew up going to Sunday Mass a lot. And then it was just like de entrada por salida, ir a misa. And it wasn't until my dad decided to start the Spanish Mass at St. Bede. And from there is sort of where we planted our seed. And I grew up at the age of 7. I was on my way to do my first communion, and that's when everything started. So I grew up being heavily involved at St. Bede. From there, it was being the first altar server, it was being the first choir member, and just going everywhere where we were needed. So I became very familiar with like all the padres, all the sacraments, everything that needed to go on like during Sunday Mass and go where we needed to. I even became an usher at one point. So it was very interesting growing up. So God was someone that was like very spoken about in my household. It was very like, Diosito, no quieres que haga esto, o tienes que hacer esto porque Diosito te está viendo. But it was never forced. So that was something that I really appreciated from my parents. It was something that was never forced in our household. It was more, okay, like, vamos a ir aquí, ¿quieres ir sí o no? And being a daddy's girl, siempre me le pega a mi papá. Entonces siempre estuve yendo con él a las juntas, a las organizaciones y todo. Entonces crecí mucho en la iglesia, hasta hoy en día sigo igual, pero nunca conocía la importancia. You know, like, nunca sabía, sé que Dios está presente en la Eucaristía. Sabía que se le daba respeto, pero era un conocido, pero nunca tenía una relación. Eso no fue hasta ya tiempo después, cuando tuve una conexión y supe qué es tener una relación con Dios y en qué momento impactó mi vida. I was heavily involved in church all of high school. So all of high school, I was very dedicated to going to church. Because of choir and like starting new masses, I was going to Sunday Mass like three times a week, which was pretty heavy, I would say, for a high schooler. But I never complained. But I would say I became a little bit distant when I went away for college. So I went to school in Minnesota, and it was a Lutheran school. And there was like a Catholic organization, but I just didn't feel like home to me because like I was in a predominantly white school. So like la misa no me sabía igual. And then I just got busy with like college stuff and like trying to keep up with my grades, trying to do everything. So I sort of just like became distant from my faith. I mean, I did go for Ash Wednesday. I would go for like the important masses, but Sunday Mass wasn't in my routine anymore. When I would come back for break, yes, it was in my routine, but the 9 months that I was away, it wasn't in my routine. So I did feel that disconnection with my faith, and it would be something I would bring up like to myself, like, what are you doing? but it was never like the alarms going off like I needed God. Why? Because nothing was going wrong in my eyes during that time. It wasn't until I came back from college and I was like, okay, like, what am I doing now? And I thought I was checking all the boxes, right? I would tell my parents, ya me gradué, ya me recibí, estoy pasando tiempo con mi familia y estoy yendo a misa, right? So I was like, okay, I'm doing all the things, I'm filling every aspect of my life, like I could go out. And it was something that I never experienced like in college because I was working, I was studying. So my focus was school during that time. So coming back from college, I was like, okay, like ahorita soy libre. Puedo hacer lo que quiero, todo lo que no hice, ahora sí a disfrutar. So I did start going out a lot. I started going to bars, I started going to the bailes, el ambiente. But at first it was like, oh, like I never got to do this. I never got to experience it because COVID hit. So I never got to go to my first club. I never got to do any of that. So I started doing all of that the moment I came back from college. And I was like, oh, like, no es malo, right? Like, no es malo, ¿por qué? Porque durante el día estoy con mi mamá, estoy con mi familia, like, no les estoy perdiendo tiempo, you know? So I was like, oh, like, I'm fine. I'm gonna be fine. But I never realized what the aftermath did to me because mi mamá me decía, estás saliendo mucho, like, ya bájale. And I was like, pero ¿por qué? Like, cuando salgo ustedes ya están dormidos, no tiene caso, like, llego a la hora que llegue, voy a misa con ustedes, like, estoy trabajando, pago mis propias cosas, like, no tiene nada de malo, right? Y ese era mi argument. Y mi mamá le hace, no, pero no está bien. And me ponía nomás like no, like she doesn't have a point. She's not proving anything. Like, I'm fulfilling every single thing. Right? So in my eyes, I was still being a good daughter. I was still living to their expectations. And it wasn't until I sort of felt lost. And I say lost because going out wasn't fun for me anymore. It was a habit. It became a habit. It became a routine where it wasn't like, oh, like voy a salir a celebrar el cumpleaños de alguien or vamos a salir porque tengo ganas de bailar. You know, like everything is good in moderation. But at this point, I think I was a year and a half back from college and it was just a routine. It was just like, oh, like se acerca viernes, se acerca sábado, like what are we on? Like, ¿a dónde apunta el zapato? You know, so that's when I started to realize like, okay, like this isn't good anymore. And it was sort of like getting to the point where like I was at the club and like I was just like in my own world. Like I wasn't even there anymore. And I'm not saying it was because of the alcohol, because like I still wouldn't drink like that. But it was more like I just wanted to escape a reality and I didn't know what my reality was. I didn't know what I was running from. I didn't know like what I was doing. So I did speak to some people and I spoke to some of my best friends and they're like, Amy, like, you know, like maybe try to like fill your time with something. Because at this point, like I stopped going to choir because I didn't want the commitment of going to practice. I didn't want commitments at this time. So I kind of dropped what was keeping me close to my faith. And I got the invitation to start going to a community, right, at Iskali. I've known of Iskali for many years, but I was very in denial of Iskali, to say the least, because I was like, no, like that's not me. I always said, that's not me. And my mom was like, try it. And I was like, no, like that's not me. Like, maybe because I've always been perceived like as la hija de Don Manuel, you know, at church, always having to uphold an image, which I think was a little bit hard on me growing up. So now that I like separated myself from it, I was like, oh, like I don't have anyone expecting anything from me. But little did I realize maybe I needed that. So that's why I always said no to Iskali. And it wasn't until one day when I went to eat with Father Bobby, and I went with Giselle, with my cousin, and she was the one that was always telling me to join Iskali, but I would always say no. And we went out to eat with Father Bobby, and we bumped into Jose Carlos. And from there, we all went to eat, and he kind of spoke to me more about Iskali and everything, and I was like, oh yeah, I know, but I'm okay. And I was just like, no, it's not for me. And he called me and gave me the personal invitation, and I was like, okay, you know what, like, I'm gonna try it. I'm not gonna say no. I'll go and see what community is, right? So I made the promise to go, and I keep my word. And it just so happened that it was when we were remodeling La Casa de Retiros. So my first day ever was going to La Casa de Retiros to help clean. And I was in my car. I drove all the way there, and I was like, what am I doing? And I was going to drive back. I was putting my car in reverse. Y en eso llega Jose Carlos with Andrea, right? And they're like, oh, like, you're here. And I was like, oh, okay, like, ya me toca bajarme. So went there, and it was good. You know, I met a lot of new faces, and I enjoyed the company. So then they were like, oh, you have to come back next week and see what community is actually like when we're not doing labor. So I was like, okay, I'll go. And I went, and it was good. It was like a breath of fresh air, something that I wasn't expecting at all. And I just continued to go. And that was in August of 23. August of 23. And I was like, okay, like, I'll go. And I started going, and I liked it. And my mom was like, oh, like, so you're going? And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, it's something different. You know, I'm like, I think it's good for me to make friends elsewhere. I'm like, and I'm learning new things, like, about God that I wasn't expecting myself to, especially like with people my own age. And my mom was like, oh, like, I'm happy, you know. And then from there, I just continued going, right? And se acercaba la fecha del retiro. And they're like, oh, Amy, like, are you going to live your retreat? I was like, oh, I'm not too sure. But at this point, I think I knew my answer, but I wasn't confident in it, I would say. Because at this point, from going to community, it taught me you could have different friendships, you could have fun in different ways, and not need to be in an environment that could be toxic. You know, like, I started changing my friendships, las juntas, and just the way I sort of presented myself, I would say. I was trying to not live a double life, because I felt like part of me was like, yeah, like, I'm going to Iskali, but I wasn't fully like entregada. I wasn't developing that relationship with God just yet. I was walking, but I don't think it was like stabilized just yet. And when I said yes to the retreat, I invited one of my best friends because I didn't want to go alone. I was like, no sé a qué me voy a meter. I was like, let me see if she's down to live it. And thankfully she was. She was like, yeah, like, you provided very little detail. She's like, but I'll go. I was like, that's as much detail as I got. So she lived it with me, and we were eating before the retreat. And I was like, what if we just go home? What if we don't show up? And she was like, no. I was like, okay, let's go. So we decided to live our retreat together. And I think there is where I experienced what God's love was. I think that's where I was able to develop, like, okay, this is what a good relationship with God looks like. And I would say that's when my full circle came to be of like, qué es lo que quiero en mi vida y a dónde quiero llegar. Because I think the perfect way to experience like what my turning point would be, my heart had holes, right? My heart had holes, and I tried to fill a void different ways, like by going out, by drinking, and just doing things that I shouldn't have been doing. And it just kept getting empty, because it wasn't filling it, because my heart had holes. And during the retreat, at one specific moment, I kind of felt like someone over me and giving me like a really, really big hug. And something that we always talk about is like, God te perdona, and you always hear it everywhere, like God te perdona. But I think sometimes like when you are thinking of things like too deep, and we are our biggest critics, you're like, no, like that's not true. Like I messed up big time. I've made so many mistakes. How can someone still love me? How could someone still like me after mess up that I've done? And at the retreat, it taught me that. I felt God hug me and say like, hija, like I need you to come back. Like it doesn't matter what you did, like I still love you. And I think in that very moment, I felt like little band-aids got put over my heart, and I started filling my time with things that made me more positive. So right after I lived my retreat, it was a big, it was Lent was coming up right after my retreat. I lived the March one. So something that I dedicated was, at St. Bede, we do the 40 days you commit to an hour a week of adoration. And I committed to an hour. I said, during my lunch hour, I'm going to dedicate it to God. Once a week, like it's not a big deal. But it felt like a big deal to me, because I think one full hour when you're not used to just sitting there in silence with God could be a bit of a challenge, because it's like, okay, te pones a rezar, and what do you do for the next 45 minutes? Like a rosary is 15 minutes. So I had to be comfortable with the silent. I had to learn how to just sit there and be with God and just listen to Him, like just pour my heart and put it open. So I think after my retreat, that's what it taught me. It's like, how can I build a relationship with God? Like, how can I have a conversation with Him? Because I feel like that's something you hear a lot of people, like, God talks to me. And I was always like, how is that possible? Like, what do you see? Like, is it signs? Like, what is it? And I think like during those 40 days, like, it's little things that like when you least expect it, like Dios obra por personas. So it's like little things that you start to see and you're like, that's God, So that was my point where I was like, okay, like this is becoming nice. This is a very nice feeling. So after Lent, at my church, they still do holy hours on Fridays, like the choir is singing. So my big passion is music. So el que canta ora dos veces. So entonces, like, just through music, I feel like it's a really big connection with me and God, and it's just like how I started my faith. It's how my journey started. So that's like a really big thing for me. And I have stepped away a little bit, but I go back every once in a while when I have the time. But I would say that from there on out, like I was able to have a connection with God. I was able to continue building on that. Something I did always tell Him was like, okay, like, ¿en qué manera te puedo servir? Like maybe choir isn't for me anymore, but in what way can I serve you still? And that's when I was asked to be a guía at St. Gal. And I was very hesitant at first because I know it's a big responsibility. And I was just, before I was asked to do that, I was praying a lot, and I was like, I want to say yes. I want to say yes to whatever you send my way, but make it something I can handle. Because I'm working and I keep busy. So I'm like, something that's going to be good for me, good for my faith, but something that I could commit to. So after I was asked to join, I was like, okay, yeah, I'll take this on. And it's been a learning experience, I would say, because you have people look up to you sometimes. And I think it could be a little bit hard. But I'm also a person that's like very open. I could be very vulnerable at times. And I own up to my mistakes. So I think that helps a lot, like especially with being a guia. And just being prepared to like deliver temas and try to reach people in different ways. I think I have a variety of experience that I've been able to connect with some of my community members. So far it's been good. But I would say like my turning point and like my journey that I'm still on, it's still going, I would say, for the least. I don't know what God wants for me next, but I'm excited because I'm able to say yes, but also in moderation. And God knows that because He knows I want to serve Him, but I want to serve Him good. I don't want to do things halfway. No me gusta quedar mal. Cuando me comprometo a algo, like I give it my all. So, yeah. My last words of encouragement would be, don't say no. Even if you think you're not gonna like something, like try it out, because I'm living proof that I kept saying no. And here I am a year and a half later, deep into my journey, and I couldn't be happier with the way that I turned my life around, for a lack of better words. And it was slow, but it's definitely been worth it. So don't say no, say yes, como Maria.